What does the future hold for Mitchell Robinson with the Knicks? Is he still a good fit with this team? Is he actually indispensable? Who knows? We're going to talk about it right now on Mitch's season preview.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks first list today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit the auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. I'm Alex Wolf, I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at Strick.land, and he is Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and Mitchell Robinson might be your favorite center on the Knicks. He's kind of the only guy that's like the purest of pure centers on the team, so it's a pretty small pool to draw from. But Gavin, the quick tail of the tape on Mitch before we get into this big discussion of his future and everything. He's 26 years old this year. Time really flies. It's going into season 7. Unbelievable to think about. Yeah. It feels like we've grown up with this guy. Last season, 5.6 points per game, 8.5 rebounds per game, 1.2 steals per game, and 1.1 block per game. Shot 57.5% from the field, by far a career low for him, and 40.9% from the free throw line. Just another career low for him. Just not great in either shooting category last year. 24.8 minutes per game. In his career to date, including last season, through 6 seasons, he's averaging 8 points, 7.9 rebounds, 0.9 steals, 1.9 blocks. So a big dip in block production last year as well. 70.1% from the field and 51.8% from the free throw line in 24.5 minutes per game. So Gavin, I think that pretty much underscores it, and maybe is the best way to start this conversation. Like, last year was, for as much as he did some pretty solid stuff early in the year and, had some games that made us kind of raise our eyebrows, in many ways across the board last year, it was kind of the worst year of Mitch's career when you factor in the fact that he started the season as the starter, played pretty well, but Isaiah Hartenstein was clearly shining as his backup, and then eventually supplanted him as the starter. Mitch came back. Things were a little rough. He gets into the postseason. He gets hurt again. It just seemed to be a really, really crappy season for him. And it's all now culminated with him probably being out the first 2 months to start this season, if not a little more. So I don't know. Things are in kind of a weird place with Mitch right now, and based off how well things went without him last year, unfortunately, it's kind of fair to ask, do the Knicks need to potentially look at another option, or like, how good is this team with Mitchell Robinson potentially?
So I think there's a lot here, and I'm going to try to be succinct and not hit on every single thing we want to talk about, because it is a really multifaceted question. And my initial instinct when you said like it was the worst season of his career, I wanted to push back and be like, well, like, I don't think he's ever played better defense than he did last year. And I'm not sure if it was particularly close, right? Like you and I were saying like, all right, this is someone who should get depoy votes. And you remember when Isaiah Hartenstein came in initially for Mitchell Robinson, the Knicks had a 5-game stretch where they went from basically the best defense in basketball to by far the worst defense in basketball. And it took Hartenstein a while to replicate what Mitch was doing on that end of the floor, and the Knicks to make the OG Anunoby trade, which obviously more than solidified them on that end. But before that happened, it was Mitchell Robinson pretty much single-handedly carrying them defensively. And I think I was awed by just how much he's evolved on that end of the floor, where he went from someone as a rookie who was just a freak of nature and was blocking James Harden step back threes, which you didn't really see rookie centers in the NBA doing with any kind of consistency or really ever. and just went from this total athletic freak who could switch, who could fly around, but would foul out in 17 minutes on the wrong night, to someone who was measured, who was cagey, who could take two in a pick and roll and just play drop about as perfectly as you can in the modern NBA, deterring the ball handler from throwing a lob, from throwing up a floater, and if that pass was made, a consistent ability to knock it away, taking away shots at the rim. So you see his shot blocking is down, but it doesn't take into account, all right, how many shots aren't taken because Mitchell Robinson's there, and he knows how to leverage his size, and he knows how to intimidate in a way he didn't early on in his career. And yet, to your point, experientially, it probably was the worst year of his career because of the injuries, because of the frustrations, because of the horrible war crime of a basketball act that Joel Embiid committed against him and how it all ended. And then we get the news that he's going to miss a good chunk of this season. And you just get to this point where you're like, all right, what is the upside here? And can the Knicks, it's not even the upside, it's can the Knicks rely on this guy? And what direction is this thing going? Where, to your point, kind of inexplicably in his mid-20s, he went from someone who set the NBA's all-time record in field goal percentage to last season a mediocre finisher around the rim. And with his athleticism trending the wrong direction, with injuries piling up, is this someone the Knicks can rely on? And even if he is going to be on the court, this is what you're getting at, this is what you're asking me, does he even really fit with these guys and how they're going to play? And I'll leave it to you to expand on this, but my initial answer would be I think he's good enough that he can help them, but does he fit? No, not really. This is an ultra modern team everywhere but Mitchell Robinson.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, he's sort of a relic in some ways, and I think that the main thing that makes it difficult is that, the Knicks had a guy in Hartenstein last year who's not a floor spacer, who's not, not a guy that's going to give you much offense outside of the paint as far as shooting and stuff. So in that way is sort of similar to Mitch, but just had so many other little things to his game that made him mesh better with this group overall, which is the passing was a huge thing that Mitch just doesn't have. The floater was a big thing that Mitch just doesn't have, to be able to finish any other way than just up tight, high and tight to the hoop, either with a dunk or a little layup. That's kind of all Mitch has on offense at this point. And I think that if this team, to your point, is going to reach the highest highs that it can reach, they're probably going to need to have an option out there that can shoot credibly and can still provide some rim protection. And, there are guys like that in the NBA, guys that they've previously been linked to, that they just haven't ultimately pulled the trigger on. Now they don't really have anyone like that on the roster. So as it stands, on this roster, as it is right now, if the season started tomorrow, I would still want Mitch being the starting center, just because he's better than Precious Achiuwa. He's a much better defender. He's the best rebounder in the NBA. I think. I don't really feel, I know that he doesn't put up the splashy double doubles or whatever every single night, but the effect that he has on rebounding for a whole team is, you can't really count it unless you start digging deep into box out stats and stuff like that. You could start realizing oh, he might only quote unquote average 8 rebounds per game, but he's generating so many more rebounds for everybody else by just having an enormous body on the other team's best rebounder at all times and being really great at doing that. So there's so many things that he does well. And yet ultimately you then just look and you're like, yeah, the field goal percentage last year is kind of concerning, and that makes you wonder, how well is he going to be able to stay on the floor at this point in his career, especially when, he can't hit free throws. I mean, if you think that a Rudy Gobert or something has trouble staying on the floor in the playoffs because of free throw shooting and offensive limitations, Mitch kind of dwarfs all that at this particular moment in time. I mean, his field goal percentage is not good for a center. If it stays what it was last year, it's not even great considering he takes all of his shots at the rim. Shooting 57.5% at the rim is not good for any player. That's not even good for a guard, really. So it's just, you start looking that over and you're like, well, if that's the sort of player that he's going to be on offense, no matter what he offers you on the other parts of the game, if he's getting offensive rebounds and he's not able to convert on them, that's way less valuable on that end of the floor. And then you have to start asking yourself, well, would there just be enough offense with 4 guys that you want to keep all the benefits of his defense and rebounding? maybe you do, or maybe you don't. But I think that, it does kind of make sense that, that there's a chance that the best center for this team might not be on the team at the moment, and might need to come here some way or another.
Yeah, it was Isaiah Hardenstein. They had windows of opportunity to get someone even better. You and I have done many an episode over our 5 or 6 years of doing this on Miles Turner, and that was a road not taken. And obviously now he's I think Indiana came out today maybe and said something we want him here basically for the entirety of this run and the entirety of his prime. That window is over. There was a window last summer to go get Kristaps Porzingis. I was maybe not as enthusiastic as I should, but I was advocating on this podcast for the Knicks to maybe make a reunion happen. And to me, that is a path not taken that may swing the next 2 titles, because I think this team with Kristaps Porzingis instead of Mitchell Robinson is probably the favorite in the NBA and the favorite going forward. The finances of that, if they could have gotten Mikal Bridges, we can question that, whether they could have made that all work. I'm not 100% sure, but a center who could protect the rim and shoot threes is just the holy grail in modern basketball. And unfortunately, Mitchell Robinson is a very good rim protector, and he is the furthest thing from a center who can space the floor on the other end. And I just sort of question, there are teams, there are matchups like the Sixers and Joel Embiid. You want a Mitchell Robinson on your team, but you want him as a situational player. You don't want him as the go-to. I think Isaiah Hardenstein was better suited for that role. I think the other guys I just mentioned were way better suited for that role. And I think if Mitchell Robinson's, if you're trying to get him to play 30 minutes a game, you've questions if he can do that. And even if he could, it caps your ceiling a little bit. But Alex, there's also a lot of good with Mitchell Robinson. And I think I said it last show, but I'll say it again. I've been guilty this offseason of not always acknowledging it. So how about we get into some of the good, some of the things we're excited about next season in terms of Mitch and where this could all go well, potentially. Let's talk about that next on Locked On Knicks. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Alex, I'm looking at my New York Giants. It has not been a topic I've been fond of touching on this podcast since last season where things have been bad. We want a game. Malik Neighbors is the truth. 5.5-point underdogs to the Dallas Cowboys. Normally be pessimistic here. I'm going to be optimistic. Malik Neighbors, go out there, be the best player on the field. Hopefully he wins you all some money. If you agree with me, if you want to get in on that and so much more, head over to FanDuel.com. All right, we are back and rolling here on Locked On Knicks, talking Mitchell Robinson's present and future on the team. So we laid out our concerns. There are also some positives here, Alex. Knicks were really good when he was on the floor last season. We saw him step up when it mattered the most. You had as your best game, and I think I would agree with it, though. You could also look at the first 10 games of the season where it could be argued Mitchell Robinson was maybe the Knicks' best overall player, while Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle were taking their time finding their footing. But that first game, coming off of injury, you didn't really know what to expect. And he holds Joel Embiid in 19 minutes to 7 points on 2 of 11 shooting, just 18% from the field, 0 for 3 from distance. And that was a theme. As long as Mitch was in, Joel Embiid was really, really struggling to score the basketball. Granted, that was maybe not the apex version of Embiid. Could be healthier, could be a little bit more explosive. And at his very best, there's probably no one that can really limit him. But Mitch, throughout his career, has done a pretty good job in those matchups. Embiid, in I think it's 9 career games against Mitchell Robinson, only shoots 45% from the floor. So I don't know if I'm ready to call him the Embiid stopper, but he is certainly an important guy to have when that is maybe the looming matchup for the Knicks this side of the Celtics come playoff time. Also love having him against the Bucks with Giannis. Against the Celtics, it's great to have the rim protection. It's great to have someone who could punish Boston for playing relatively small lineups at times with his offensive rebounding. So there are these little like matchups and moments in these big games where you could say, all right, he's not modern, he doesn't space the floor, but he gives you defined advantages on both ends of the floor that at some point you just have to look at the opportunity cost. The Knicks have no one else that gives that to them. And I'm not sure there's anyone else that they could acquire that comes close to providing what Mitch brings to the table as a defender and as an offensive rebounder.
Yeah, I think it's the offensive rebounding that would be the hardest thing to replicate for me. I just don't think that there's any player that you could get in the league that could replicate that while offering a meaningful upgrade anywhere else, other than maybe the guy they just lost in Isaiah Hartenstein.
Yeah.
So it just, kind of underscores just the shame that it is that they had to lose him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great, but 20. I just looked up his rebound percentages for this past year. 20.7% offensive rebound percentage is nonsensical. Most players average like 5%, and that's decent, or 10%. Mitch was averaging 20%. 20% of the time that there was an offensive rebound available, Mitch grabbed it, is what that stat means, which is crazy. That is 1 out of every 5 misses he gets a hand on for the Knicks, which is super valuable. I mean, they built an entire offense around that basically 2 years ago.
A top 3 offense in the league around that. Yeah.
Right. And, so that can't be understated. I think the important thing there is just that he gets his finishing back. And I think that it almost seemed like in some ways he had the yips a little bit last year with around the rim. It's just like he had stone hands a lot. It was kind of weird. He was pretty sure-handed at earlier parts in his career and just didn't seem to be able to get a good handle of the ball last year for those putback dunks or layups, or even just not even a putback, just regular opportunities. And if he puts that back together and he starts shooting 70% again at the rim and can offensive rebound where he's getting a hand on 1 in every 5 offensive rebounds, like maybe they can still make this work then, because then the spacing doesn't matter as much when you're getting that many second opportunities. So if you're losing out a little bit on being able to optimize your offensive players to the best of their ability by getting them to the rim or whatever, fine, just have them shoot threes. And then statistically, it's going to kind of work out just like it did for the Knicks a couple of years ago, where they were like a bottom 10 3-point shooting team and yet a top 3 offense, thanks to the contributions of Mitch. And then to an extent, like Julius Randle as well, who feeds, it should be noted, feeds really, really well off of what Mitch offers rebounding wise, because then that opens up more offensive rebounding chances for Julius when Mitch is boxing out so well. I think Julius gets a lot of defensive rebounds because Mitch essentially, I don't want to say he doesn't go for them, but I don't think that he's as aggressive going for them, because I'm pretty sure it's been drilled into him the advantage that having someone like a Randall or a Josh Hart or something get that defensive board gives the Knicks. So Mitch just gives the 100th percentile box out, and then one of those guys gets the ball and then can start running it down the other end of the floor and potentially get a bucket. So I think really the rebounding, Mitch is maybe the best and one of the smartest rebounders in the entire NBA. And, like you said, at his best, he's one of the best defenders at the 5 in the NBA. Really, it all just comes down to his offense at this point. And it's just like, if he could just get even just back to his career average of 70%, or even slightly less, let's say he shoots 67% or something like that. If he gets to that and can do that this year, I think we're talking about this being a really, really good half plus season for him, whenever he's able to come back from this injury, because that's kind of just the last question mark at this point. And, for as much as it would be great to have a center that could stretch the floor or whatever, there's also a lot of value in a guy that gives you a free pass on 1 of every 5 shots you take. So yeah, I think I think that's sort of where I land on Mitch as far as the positives. Like, if he could just sort that one thing out, which is the field goal percentage and making more of his shots, things have potential to be really good this year.
Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that last season was such an outlier in terms of his finishing, and was also a small sample size, right? Because he only played 31 games last year. And you go back to that stat that I referenced. 52nd percentile at the rim. He in his previous 6 years, or 5 years, I guess, he'd never been below the 91st percentile. It just, even with the leg injury, it doesn't really make sense to me that he would be 40% relative to the rest of the league worse as a finisher. Like that like going from elite to mediocre at age 26, unless the previous injuries or the weight were just worse than I thought. To me, I think a big part of it, like you mentioned that he had the yips a little bit. I think he didn't want to get fouled. And I think that's what other teams were starting to do. Like anytime he got the ball, like off an offensive rebound, the scouting report understandably was just wrap the dude up. Like, don't let him go up for a jam. And like Mitch got into his own head and has somehow, like, this is not a fluke. You pointed out, like, has gotten, like, he went from a 60% free throw shooter as a rookie. And if you and I were talking about it then, we would say, all right, 60% is not great, but like this is probably the worst he'll ever be in his career. Instead, from there, 57, 49, 48 and a half, 48 and a half, down to 41. Like it just feels inexplicable, especially when the guy like comes out of nowhere to make big free throws in the playoffs. So I don't know what that's all about. Ideally, that would go up a little bit, but to say like, all right, this is just who he is now, which is an average guy at the rim, I think he's too big. I think he's still too athletic. I think there is a decent chance he bounces back there. Where I get caught up both in the positives and the negatives, and like we've touched on this, but we haven't like given a definitive answer yet, is like what is the fit at this point? And it's such a weird thing to ask, in that Mitchell Robinson was the Knicks' identity 2 years ago. Like you look at that playoff series win over the Cavs. I think Mitch, even more than Brunson, like dictated who the Knicks were in that series, and that was bullies, right? Like they just murdered the Cavs on the glass, and it got to a point where Cleveland was done by Game 5, right? They wanted to go home. They wanted to go 1-2-3 Cancun, and it's because Mitchell Robinson broke their spirit, and between him and Isaiah Hartenstein, they just couldn't stop them. And in a way, it was the Knicks compensating, because at least in terms of offensive talent, they might not have been the more talented team in that series. Last season against the Sixers, they weren't the more talented team. And yet because of their like scrappiness, because of their rebounding, they were able to win both those series. And now with Mikal Bridges, with OG Anunoby, with Julius Randle, with Jalen Brunson, they will have a talent advantage on both teams. But do you want to lose what made you great in the first place? And to some extent, with the Villanova guys, with the culture they have, they're not going to lose that toughness. They're not going to lose that tenacity. They're not going to lose that hustle. But I do wonder if at a certain point, not having that physical advantage that Isaiah Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson gave you at the center position for 48 minutes, does that catch up with you? And can you ultimately just not play that way anymore without those two guys?
Well, I have a rebuttal for that, or not a rebuttal, but so much just continuing the discussion.
Hmm.
So we'll get to that in just a second when we get back in. But first, I got to let you all know about our friends over at Gametime. And Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I'm bummed that the Mets' home season is done, so I can't go to any more home games unless I go to a playoff game. But I did get to, thanks to Gametime, go to a few games over the course of this month, which was great. I had a great time. It was very fun watching good Mets baseball. And I was only able to do it because I could justify the time going out there and everything else by the fact of like, yeah, it's so inexpensive because I'm buying them off Gametime. I went on there and they showed me the best deals. I got awesome seats for like 15, 20 bucks each. Got to enjoy the game, eat some good food. It was so much fun. So if you love going to live events, whether it's, baseball, or maybe you're starting to look at Knicks tickets, they just went on full sale. And if you missed that, then you could go get some off Gametime and hopefully not pay an arm and a leg. Although I'll tell you, the face value ticket's not great either. Thanks, James Dolan. Anyway, head to Gametime. They'll show you how to get in there for as little as you could possibly afford. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Hey, that helps. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, Gavin, we're back in to finish talking through this Mitch discussion and just the overall fit. And I think I'm sort of with you at this point. If the Knicks want, I think it's just going to come down to they either need to get someone to supplement Mitch, or they need to really hit it out of the park with playing small ball and feel comfortable enough with doing that consistently and potentially to close games, potentially close playoff games. Or they need to look at a new full-time center option that can give you enough of what Mitch does, but also space the floor a little more, also maybe pass the ball a little bit. And those guys are not dime a dozen. That's why Isaiah Hartenstein, for as much as some people raise their eyebrows, if you're just looking at the stat sheet, like, what, this guy is going to make almost like $30 million a year. It's like, yeah, because he's that good. I mean, he does that much on the floor, and all the little things that don't necessarily show up on a stat sheet, like keeping the ball moving from the center spot, and the floater is just such a deadly weapon and all that stuff. It's like the more multifaceted of a player you can get at the center position now, while not giving up any of the traditional center traits, like being able to rebound, which is very in vogue in the NBA now. Again, thanks to Mitchell Robinson and thanks to Tibbs, like, rebounding is making a big comeback, and offensive rebounding is becoming something that teams care about again after basically abandoning it for like 10 years, from like 2010, or like end of the Heat era, and then all the way through the Golden State era, and up to kind of like where we are now. Like, teams during that Golden State era kind of just started giving up on offensive rebounds, and we're just like, no, it's more beneficial to get back, on defense rather than go for that offensive board, get that, the rebound on defense and play good defense there. And then you could just go down and shoot another three. And Tibbs and Mitch kind of blew that all out of the water with how good the Knicks, played 2 years ago. And they like found a new wrinkle and sort of started a new trend in the NBA where teams suddenly care about things like offensive rebounding again. So you need to find someone who doesn't sacrifice anything there, but I think just offers you a little bit more on the offensive end. I think, the ability to potentially go 5 out, or at least 4.5 out, someone that can be comfortable at the elbow, taking a jumper there or something, or, just in general, spacing the defense out a little further than right next to the rim, because that does make it difficult on other players around the rim on the Knicks to be able to get there and finish their, their looks and everything. So I think if I was going to give my answer, and, maybe you feel differently about this, but I think that based off what his contract is, I would kind of like to keep Mitch if the Knicks can afford it. I would love if we could get a Brock Aller special of some sort that would allow them to acquire, like, is pending that he looks good and healthy and everything after the injury last year. But like, if they could get like Robert Williams off Portland and somehow not give up Mitchell Robinson, I think that's your ideal. I just think like what he does offer, and the fact that if you run into the Sixers in the playoffs again with a more stacked lineup than they had last year. So now you have to deal with Paul George too. So you're not really going to be able to play small ball if you got to occupy OG Anunoby on Paul George and potentially Mikal Bridges on Tyrese Maxey. Like, what do you do with Joel Embiid then? Having a Mitch would be great there. And I think that there are certain moments in a season, in a game, on any given possession where it could be extremely beneficial to have a Mitchell Robinson on your team. And so for that reason, plus the emotional attachment, I hope that they're not like ready to move on at this point, at least not fully. But I do think that it might be beneficial for them to try to find another player that can potentially be the starter, much like Isaiah Hartenstein was, and have Mitch sort of be that off the bench, ultra big, ultra bulky, ultra awesome rebounder, really good defender option, who maybe just can't be out there in certain high leverage situations where not having that spacing and not having that free throw shooting could potentially lose you your season or something,
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. I think the Knicks' ability to win a championship in this Jalen Brunson Nova Boys era will come down to finding a starting center that is better than Mitchell Robinson. And unfortunately, the Knicks, they had that and they lost that in Isaiah Hartenstein. I think at some point in the next 3 years there will be one more crack at it, especially as the Knicks' first round picks open up. And they have more to trade as time goes along, and it might maybe will take the full 2 seasons for the Knicks to have enough assets to make a run at someone who's probably not Miles Turner, but someone like a Miles Turner who might not even be in the league yet, or might not have developed as a shooter yet, but could get there. For now, like, Mitch is a very good option for a very good team. I just hope there is a curveball there. Maybe that is Robert Williams is someone who's a little bit more mobile if he's healthy. And it's almost just like one injury risk. Let's have 2 injury risks. Presumably one of them will be okay as long as the Knicks got all their bad karma out last year. Another name that
sort of the same story as iHeart, though, if you think about it, because that was another guy who doesn't have a small injury rap sheet either, unfortunately.
For sure. Another name that the Athletic threw out today, and shout out to James L. Edwards III, new Knicks beat writer on the Athletic. Hope to get him on the pod at some point. I think this was his first or maybe second article, but he threw out the name of a guy he used to cover, Isaiah Stewart, who has turned himself into a pretty good 3-point shooter and is also a New York native. Last season, 38% on 4 attempts per game from distance, 6'8", but has a 7'4" wingspan, so a little bit OG Anunoby-esque, but even longer in that sense. I think to me that is really important. Like if you're riding with Mitchell Robinson, have a center that can shoot the basketball a little bit and gives you a little bit more scheme versatility. Precious Achiuwa brings some of those traits in that he's much more switchable than Mitchell Robinson is at this point in his career. And Precious in his own right gives you like not Mitchell Robinson level offensive rebounding, but is a very good, if not an elite offensive rebounder. I would like to put a third guy in there like a Stewart who can shoot the ball while not totally being a sieve on defense. But for now, like I think it just comes down to like whatever nits we want to pick with Mitch. Like he is just simply the best center the Knicks are going to have this year, unless they find a way to trade for Walker Kessler. And even then, I don't know if I kind of don't think Walker Kessler is the better player today than Mitchell Robinson is. More flexibility, maybe more upside down the road. But right now, Mitch is the best you're going to get. And I am genuinely really excited. I've said it a bunch of times, but to see him, OG Anunoby, and Mikal Bridges on a basketball court wearing Knicks uniforms at the same time, I think it is going to be scary for other teams. And I do think there are going to be games when Mitchell Robinson's out there with Julius Randle, with Anunoby, with Bridges. Just think about the collective size, Alex, that is going to be there. Like they are just going to bludgeon teams into submission. And I think it would, as much talent as the Knicks have right now, even playing small, they're probably not going to out-talent, not going to outshoot the Boston Celtics. There is something to the idea, even though I've been guilty all summer of saying like, oh, it's small ball's the way, small ball's the way. I'm going to play devil's advocate with myself. There's a case to be made. The way to beat that team is maybe just by crushing them on the glass. And Mitchell Robinson is your way to do that. And therefore, very, very important for him to come back, to be healthy, and hopefully have a great run on this team, because I think you and I have agreed, like since we've been doing this podcast, maybe our single favorite personality on the Knicks, just flat out one of my favorite Knicks of all time. So I hope it works out for him.
Yeah, I was going to end on that same note. I mean, I feel for Mitchell Robinson. I feel like his whole career has just been one setback after another. And, some of them, I unfortunately, I think that this ankle issue presents the first time where I've ever been legitimately worried that his long-term health might take a hit here. He was unfortunately like just hit with kind of freak injuries, at other points in his career. He had the was it the broken wrist at one point?
Yeah.
And then was it a broken collarbone or something at one point? Like something else that was just weird and like kind of a freak injury, like things that you just go, well, that's not going to affect him because it's not his lower body. So it's fine, and it's just like, these various little things here and there. And it's just, it feels like every time he starts building momentum, another injury strikes, and then he's out for at minimum like a month, and then you're just like, ugh, like it was just starting to come together for him. Then he's got to come back. He's got to ramp up. He's got to, just get back into shape again. And then it just all falls apart again. And, it really stinks. I cannot get over, I will never, ever get over the fact that this most recent one was literally just caused intentionally by another player, by Joel Embiid. And that really sucks. And that's where I really, really feel for him going into this year, because the Knicks really have something to play for. They really need him on the floor, and he's not going to be able to be there because Joel Embiid decided to tug on his leg while he's going for a dunk. So that sucks too. But hopefully he's able to put it together this year. He's the guy that probably out of anyone, like it's like I just said, like you and I have like grown up with this dude. Like we've been hosting this podcast pretty much his whole career, and we've been going at this for like freaking, oh my God, 6 years now in December. So like, it's he's a guy that I would love to see, right there winning a championship with this team and getting to cash in on what he helped build here, because really he's been the consistent presence on this team when there's been no consistency. So I really hope the best for him. I hope that this year works out, and I hope that the Knicks ultimately win with him rather than rather than reach the point of realizing that they need to move on from him. But it is ultimately a business, and maybe that is where they end up. Who knows? We'll see this season, or perhaps slightly beyond this season. But hopefully Mitch makes a speedy recovery, but also a healthy recovery, and comes back ready to rock the world when he gets back, whether it's December or early January or whenever it happens to be. But at any rate, we'll be here to talk about that when that happens, and also to preview some more players and bring you guys some other cool episodes. We're back on our daily posting schedule. So we got lots of great content coming for you guys in the coming days, weeks, months, year, whatever. But until next time, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.
Nice.